forced into a marriage with a criminal billionaire. But his dark secrets could save my sister's life. I didn't dream of this day. There was no sparkle in my eyes. No trembling joy. No lace-lined scrapbook marked someday. I wore white because it looked clean. Not because I felt pure. Not because I was in love. Just clean. Like a blank page I was being asked to bleed on. The room was too quiet. No music, no crowd, just the echo of footsteps across polished marble. I stepped forward, one slow breath at a time, as if walking into a courtroom, one where I was both the witness and the sentence. He stood at the front. Dominic Langston. Black suit. Sharp jaw. Silver cufflinks that probably cost more than what I'd paid for my sister's entire hospital stay last year. He didn't look at me. Not once. Not even as I reached his side. "Do you, Elena Grace Marshall, take this man?" "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. Not because I was brave. But because I had rehearsed it. Alone, last night. Again and again. He didn't flinch. Not even when he said, "Yes," he said, flatly. We exchanged rings like handing off contracts. No kiss. No smile. Just the sterile sound of papers sliding across a table as the officiant handed us our marriage license. I signed first. He didn't hesitate when it was his turn. And just like that, I was someone's wife. Not his lover. Not his friend. Just his wife. The ride to his penthouse was silent. He didn't open the door for me. I didn't expect him to. When the elevator dinged at the top floor, I stepped out into a place that didn't feel like a home. The floors were cold stone. The ceilings stretched like they wanted to keep you small. Everything was black, grey, or glass. He gestured to the hallway. "Your room is on the right," he said. "That's it?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He looked at me then. Just once. His eyes were dark and unreadable. "This isn't a romance," he said, quietly. "Don't make it one." He walked away. My room was big enough to echo. A queen-sized bed with crisp white sheets. A closet full of clothes I hadn't bought. A single window overlooking the city. No personal touches. No softness. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled off my heels. My toes were red and sore. My head was heavier than my veil. Outside my door, I heard nothing. Just nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked out barefoot into the hallway. Every step against the marble felt like I didn't belong. I passed the kitchen. Dark. Empty. I passed his study. Door shut. Then I saw it. A door at the end of the hall. Closed. But different. Not like the others. Older wood. A brass doorknob. No number, no label. Just there. I reached for it. "Don't," he said, from behind me. I turned. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes tired but sharp. "What's in there?" I asked, quietly. "Not everything in this house belongs to you," he said, and walked past me. I didn't follow him. But I didn't forget either. Later, I lay on the bed, eyes open in the dark. I thought of Myra, my little sister, crying as I left. Begging me not to do this. And I thought of Dominic's voice. Low. Final. "This isn't a romance. Don't make it one." But I was already wondering what he hid behind that door. And what he hid behind his silence. Morning came, but I didn't feel rested. The city looked different from up here, calm, almost distant. Like the people rushing on the sidewalks and the cars below were part of another world, one I used to belong to. I stood by the window for a long time, holding the curtain between my fingers. The fabric was soft. Warmer than anything else I'd felt since I walked into this house. I didn't hear him coming. "You'll be expected to attend dinners," he said, from behind me. I turned, startled. He was already dressed. A dark grey suit. Hair neat. Eyes cold. "Dinners?" I asked. He nodded. "Business functions. Appearances. You'll play the part." "And what's my part?" "My wife," he said, with zero emotion. "Nothing more." I looked at him for a long time. "Okay," I whispered. He stepped closer, not close enough to touch, just enough to lower his voice. There are rules, he said. I raised a brow. Of course there are. He ignored the sarcasm. 1. Don't go into my study unless invited. 2. Don't ask about the locked room. 3. We don't talk about the past. Mine or yours? I swallowed. And what happens if I break the rules? His jaw tightened. Then this arrangement ends, he said, firmly. And I let your sister's debt fall back on her. I felt like the floor shifted under me. You wouldn't, I said, quietly. I would, he said, without blinking. This isn't love, Elena. It's protection. Conditional. I bit down hard on my tongue to keep the tears from showing. He walked away. Again. I spent most of that day wandering the house. Not snooping, just looking for warmth. For life. There was none. No photos. No books. Not even a single speck of dust to remind you someone had touched something once. It was like walking through a museum of someone's grief. That night, I set the table for 2. He didn't show up. At 9 p.m., I put the food away. At 9:15, I knocked on the study door. Dominic. I called. Silence. I knocked again, softer. I made dinner. Still nothing. I stood there for a full minute. Waiting. Then I walked back to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. I ate it sitting on the stool, barefoot, with the sound of the city buzzing low beneath the windows. At 11:30, the study door opened. I heard his footsteps cross the marble floor. Slow. Steady. And then, they stopped. I didn't turn around. You waited, he said, quietly. I looked down at my empty plate. I don't like eating alone, I said, honestly. A pause. I told you not to expect anything from me, he said. I didn't, I said, standing to wash my plate. But I hoped. He didn't reply. But he didn't walk away either. The next morning, there was a small note on the kitchen counter. Thank you for the meal. D. I stared at it for a long time. Not because it was sweet. But because it was something. I kept the note. I didn't know why, exactly. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't even a full sentence. But it was the first thing he'd given me that felt human. So, I folded it and slipped it into the back pocket of my journal, the one I never wrote in, but carried anyway. Like some part of me hoped I'd have something worth remembering someday. The next week passed slowly. We didn't speak much. Just polite nods, short instructions, clipped sentences. But there were changes. Small ones. He started eating dinner in the kitchen. Not with me, but near me. Sitting across the island, scrolling through emails, barely saying a word. Still, it was different. He didn't hide in his study anymore. And he didn't close the door to the locked room. Not fully. One night, I found him sitting in the living room. No phone. No tablet. Just him, and silence. I stood by the edge of the room, unsure if I should interrupt. He noticed me. Barely. But enough. If you're going to stand there, he said, you might as well sit. I hesitated. Then I walked over and sat on the other end of the couch. Far enough to breathe. Close enough to feel him. He didn't speak for a long time. I didn't push. Then, finally, he said, you remind me of someone. I turned my head. Who? I asked, gently. His eyes were distant. My mother, he said. The words landed between us like something sacred and broken. She stayed too long in a place that didn't deserve her, he said, voice low. She gave everything and asked for nothing. That kind of love, it ruins people. I swallowed the ache rising in my throat. Maybe it saves them, too, I whispered. He looked at me then. Really looked. But he didn't reply. The next day, there was music playing in the kitchen. Just low, classical, maybe. And a fresh cup o'. He'd left already. But the mug was still warm. On Friday, I wore a blue dress. Myra had picked it out for me before the wedding. You'll look beautiful in this, she'd said, holding it up. If you're going to give everything up, you might as well look like a queen. I wore it because I missed her. I came down the stairs, heels soft against the steps, and caught Dominic at the bottom. He turned and froze. His eyes moved from my face to my dress, and then away. "You look," he said, then paused. "Different. Better or worse?" I asked, half teasing. "Better," he said, too quickly. "I mean, fine." "It's fine." I smiled. He cleared his throat and walked ahead. That night, he asked if I wanted to watch something. A movie. We didn't sit too close. We didn't touch. But halfway through, I leaned my head back against the couch, just a little tired. And when I did, he shifted slowly so my shoulder brushed his. He didn't move away. When the credits rolled, neither of us said anything. The lights stayed low. The silence didn't feel heavy this time. Just present. "I don't know how to do this," he said, suddenly. I looked over at him. "Be married?" I asked. He nodded. "Me neither," I whispered. He exhaled. A short breath, almost a laugh. Not bitter. Just tired. But softer than before. It was raining the next morning. Soft. Slow. The kind of rain that made the whole city look like it was trying to remember something. I stood by the window with my coffee, watching the clouds drag shadows across the glass towers. Behind me, the house was silent, but not in the same way it used to be. There was something now. A stillness that felt like it was waiting. I walked past the locked room later that day. My bare feet made no sound against the cool stone floor. I wasn't going to open it, I never did. But the door. It wasn't fully shut. It sat there, slightly ajar. Just enough that I could see a sliver of darkness beyond it. I froze. Every part of me whispered don't, but another part, the one that missed her sister, that hated feeling like a ghost in her own life, moved anyway. I pushed the door open. Inside was dust. And memories. Stacks of boxes. Shelves. A piano in the corner, half covered by a white sheet. Photographs scattered across a long wooden table. It didn't look like the rest of the house. It looked lived in. I stepped in, quietly, like I was intruding. One picture caught my eye. A woman, elegant, smiling. Her eyes were warm, her hands wrapped around a little boy who looked like Dominic. I picked it up carefully. "Put it down," he said, from behind me. I turned fast, startled. He was in the doorway, rain still clinging to his shoulders, his coat dripping onto the floor. "I'm sorry," I said, quickly. The door was open, he finished, stepping inside. "It does that. Sometimes. But it doesn't mean you're invited." I placed the photo back, gently. "Was that her?" I asked, softly. "Your mother?" He didn't answer right away. Then he walked over, picked up a different photo, and stared at it. "She was the only one who ever stayed," he murmured. I stayed quiet. She was strong. Smarter than anyone gave her credit for. And she loved me in a way I still don't understand. He looked at me. But she broke under the weight of other people's sins. My father's. Mine. He set the photo down. "I didn't want you to see this. I didn't want to explain." "You don't have to," I said, gently. He looked surprised. Almost grateful. But then he said, "Then why did you come in?" I hesitated. "Because I want to understand you," I said, honestly. "And because it's hard to pretend I'm only here for a contract when sometimes it doesn't feel like that." The air tightened between us. He stepped closer, only slightly, and looked down at me. "You're not ready to understand me," he said, voice low. "But you saw her. You saw the only good part." Then he turned, walked out, and left the door wide open behind him. That night, I dreamed of my mother. She was standing in the rain, arms outstretched, whispering something I couldn't hear. When I woke up, I realized I missed her more than I thought. And maybe that's why I saw him standing in that room. Not as a stranger, but as someone who knew the same ache. Loss. The next morning, he was waiting by the door. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" I asked. He opened the elevator. "To where the contract ends," he said, "and the truth begins." The elevator moved in silence. Dominic stood beside me, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the descending numbers like he was counting more than just floors. Maybe regrets. Maybe seconds until he changed his mind. I didn't speak. I didn't ask questions. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I knew if I did, the moment might vanish like steam off the glass. When the doors opened, I expected cold concrete. An underground office. Some lifeless storage vault filled with paperwork and secrets. But it wasn't that. It was a garden. An indoor one. Green vines clung to glass walls, curling toward the ceiling where soft light poured through in slanted beams. A stone path led through carefully kept plants, roses, orchids, even tiny wildflowers that had no business blooming in a place like this. I stopped walking. "It's beautiful," I whispered. He didn't look at me. "It was hers," he said, voice low. "My mother's." I turned slowly. She used to say, "Even when everything dies, something will grow again. If you let it." He walked to a bench in the middle of the path. Sat down. I joined him, carefully. The air smelled like lavender and rain. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked. He hesitated. Then he said, "Because I'm tired of pretending you're just a contract." The words knocked the air from my lungs. I looked at him. His jaw was tight, like it pained him to say it. Like honesty was foreign, and tasted. "I've spent years building a life made of rules and silence," he said. "No questions. No memories. Just control." He paused, then added, "Then you walked in, and disrupted everything." I didn't know what to say. So I whispered, "I didn't mean to." "I know," he said. "That's why it's real." We sat in silence for a long time. I looked at the flowers, the way the light danced across his sleeve, the way his hand curled slightly between us but didn't reach. "I wasn't supposed to get involved," he murmured. "Involved?" I echoed, barely breathing the word. He looked at me, then really looked. And for the first time, his eyes weren't cold. They were haunted. And soft. And tired. "You make it harder to stay numb," he said. I swallowed. "I don't want you numb," I said, gently. "I know," he whispered. That night, I sat at my vanity, brushing my hair when he knocked. Softly. I turned. He stood in the doorway, hesitation wrapped around his shoulders like a second suit. "I'm not here to talk about rules," he said. I waited. I wanted to say goodnight," he said. Something in my chest cracked. "Good night, Dominic," I said, voice low. He lingered for a second. Then turned and left. But he left the door open. It was still dark when I opened my eyes. Not from a nightmare. Not from a sound. Just awake. The kind of awake that feels like your soul knows something before your body does. I sat up in bed and listened. No footsteps. No creaking. Just rain again, soft against the windows. Like a lullaby for ghosts. I walked into the hallway barefoot, fingers brushing against the wall. The house always felt colder at night. Quieter, too, like it had secrets it only whispered to itself. When I passed the locked room, I didn't look inside. But when I passed Dominic's door, it was open. Again. A small light glowed from within, his reading lamp. I paused. And maybe I shouldn't have. But I stepped closer. He was asleep. Slouched in the armchair near the window, a book half open in his lap, one hand resting over his heart. There was something different about him when he slept. Softer. Vulnerable. Like the weight he carried when awake was too heavy to hold in dreams. I didn't mean to stare. But I did. Because this man, this stranger I had married for my sister's freedom, was no longer just cold eyes and sharp words. He was tired. And wounded. And, somehow, beautiful. I turned to leave. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured. His eyes didn't open, but his voice was clear, low and rough, like gravel laced with warmth. I froze. "No," I whispered. "Could you?" He let out a breath. "Not really." There was a pause. Then, quietly, he said, "You can come in. If you want." I hesitated. But I walked in. I sat on the edge of the couch across from him. The silence between us was different now. Not heavy. Not tense. It felt like it was holding something. "I used to think silence meant peace," he said, softly. Now I think it just means no one's brave enough to speak. I watched him. And are you? I asked. Brave enough? His lips twitched. For you, he said, I'm trying. We talked that night. Not for long. But long enough. He told me about the house, the garden, the way he lost sleep for years after his mother died. How he hated rain, but kept the windows open because she used to say it made the house feel alive. I told him about Myra. About how loud she laughed. How she sang off-key when no one was listening. How she got into trouble just to prove she could get out of it. She loved you, he said, after a while. I know, I whispered. But she used you, he added, voice quieter. And I hate that. I looked at him. Then why agree to the marriage? I asked. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, because when she begged me, she cried your name, not hers. The rain grew louder outside. Or maybe the silence inside got thinner. And in the hush that followed his. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was a seed. And seeds, they don't need sunlight at first. Just the right kind of silence. The next morning came with no rain. Just light. Pale and cold. The kind that doesn't warm the skin, only makes shadows more obvious. I made tea in the quiet. Dominic had already left. Or so I thought. Until I found the note. Neatly placed on the kitchen island, written in his careful, straight-lined script. Second drawer in my study. There's something you need to see. Dominic. I stared at the paper for a long moment. His study had always been closed. Locked, even. But the door was open now. I found the drawer easily. Inside, a plain black folder, nothing else. I opened it. Letters. Photos. One voice recorder. And a single envelope with my name on it. Handwritten. In Myra's messy, rushed handwriting. My heart stuttered. I didn't open it right away. I read the letters first. They weren't from Dominic. They were from Myra. To him. Over months. Maybe years. In them, she pleaded for time. For money. For help. And over again, she wrote about me. Elena doesn't know. I can't tell her. She'd never forgive me. If anything happens to me, please, protect her. Don't let her carry this. She's the only real thing I've ever had. Every line felt like a match striking inside my chest. Because she wasn't just in debt. She was drowning. And she was keeping me from the undertow. I picked up the envelope. My hands trembled. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single-page letter. Elena. If you're reading this, then you found out. Somehow, some way, you found what I couldn't keep buried. I didn't want you to know what I did. How far I fell. How deep I dragged him with me. Dominic was never supposed to marry you. That was me. My failure. My final deal. He offered something I didn't deserve, mercy. He gave it. But he asked for one thing. He asked for you. Not to punish. But to save. He saw you once. Years ago. Said you looked like someone who still had hope. I'm so sorry. Love always. Myra. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, feeling everything inside me go quiet. Then, like a dam finally cracking, the tears came fast. Hot and quiet. Not just for her. But for the truth. For what it cost. For what it meant. That evening, I didn't wait for him to come home. I waited for him on the rooftop garden. He found me sitting on the edge of the stone path, staring at a blooming white lily. You read it, he said. Yes, I whispered. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. I looked at him. She begged you not to tell me, I said. She did, he replied. But you still brought me here. He nodded once. Because I didn't do it for her, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I did it for you. I swallowed. So all of this, it was never about a contract. He shook his head. No, he said, gently. It was about giving you a way out. I looked away. Then why does it feel like a cage? He stepped closer. Because you haven't figured out yet, he murmured, that you hold the key. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the letter. Not even because of Dominic. But because of me. Because for the first time since I was dragged into this, I realized I'd never actually made a decision. Everything, every moment, had been borrowed. Borrowed from Myra's mistakes. Borrowed from Dominic's silence. Borrowed from a life I never asked for. And I was tired of it. I sat in front of the mirror the next morning, brushing my hair like it was an act of war. Not against him. Not against her. Against the version of me who never asked, never pushed, never dared. When I came downstairs, Dominic looked up from his coffee. "You didn't sleep," he said. "No," I replied. He stood. "You want to talk?" I met his eyes. "Yes," I said, steady. "But not here." We drove in silence. No chauffeur. No destination. Just a car, and the road, and the weight of the truth between us. Eventually, he pulled over near the cliffs outside the city. The wind was sharp, the sky a soft steel gray. The kind of place you go to let things go or fall apart. I stepped out, my hair whipping in the wind. He joined me. "I didn't expect forgiveness," he said, gently. "Only understanding." "I didn't come here to forgive," I replied, my voice firm. "I came here to choose." He turned toward me, uncertain. For the first time in a long time, I continued, "I'm not someone's burden. Not Myra's shadow. Not your quiet project. I'm me." He took a step closer. "And who is that?" he asked, voice low. I took a breath. "She's someone who wants to feel chosen. Not out of guilt. Not out of obligation. But out of love," I said. Silence. Then he said, "I did choose you." "No," I said, calmly. "You saved me." "That's different." His jaw tightened. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he murmured. "And maybe you were," I said, eyes softening. "But now, I get to decide what's right for me." He stepped even closer. The wind pulled at his coat. His hands were bare. "Elena," he said, voice aching, "I'm not good at this." "I know," I whispered. "But I'm trying," he said, "and not because I pity you. Not because I owe your sister anything. I'm trying because every time you speak, I hear something I forgot existed." "What?" I asked, quietly. "Hope," he said. We stood there, two people on the edge of something we didn't have a name for. And maybe we weren't ready to jump. Not yet. But we weren't walking away, either. I reached for his hand. He took it. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a contract. It felt like a beginning. The morning was peaceful. For once, it felt like life had stopped holding its breath. I made breakfast. Dominic joined me without a word. He poured coffee, and I didn't flinch when our hands brushed. Small things. Soft tea. It was the first time I caught him watching me, not out of suspicion or distance, but something warmer. Something closer. I was cutting fruit when the doorbell rang. We both paused. No one ever came here. He stood slowly, as if something inside him had already guessed. When he opened the door, I heard one word. A name. And it changed everything. "Hello, Dominic," the woman said. She walked in like she'd never left. Tall. Striking. Hair like ash and fire. A presence that didn't ask for space, it took it. Dominic didn't speak. I stood up slowly. Her eyes landed on me with measured interest. "So," she said, cool and amused, "you must be the wife." Dominic flinched. I froze. She smiled. "I'm Liana." Then she looked at Dominic again. "You didn't tell her, did you?" He closed the door, but the damage was already done. "What is she talking about?" I asked, turning to him. He didn't answer. Not right away. Then, finally, he said, "Liana and I were engaged." The words landed like a slap. Not because of what they were, but because of everything they left out. I looked at him. "For how long?" I whispered. 3 years, Liana answered for him, pulling off her gloves. Until he broke it off, without explanation. Dominic's jaw tensed. "That's not true." "Oh," she snapped, stepping closer. "Then what would you call walking away from the person you said you'd marry? From the life we planned?" No word. No reason. Nothing. I had my reasons, he said, tightly. Of course you did, she spat, because running from real feelings is your specialty. I couldn't move. Not because I was angry, but because I suddenly didn't know who this man beside me really was. And Liana saw it. She stepped toward me. He doesn't talk about it, does he? She said, voice low. The night his mother died. The things he blamed himself for. The things he ran from, including me. Liana, that's enough, Dominic said, firm, his voice rising slightly. But she wasn't finished. You think you know him? She asked me, her voice cutting. You don't. He's made of silence. Of regret. He doesn't love. He compensates. And then she turned back to him. And you married her, she hissed, because she was easy to save. Not because you chose her. That did it. I stepped forward. Leave, I said, my voice calm but cold. She raised an eyebrow. I said, leave. She scoffed. You think you understand him? No, I said, eyes hard. But I see him. And I don't need you telling me what that means. She looked at Dominic one last time. Something unreadable passed between them. Then she left. The door shut. And the silence after was deafening. Dominic didn't look at me. I should have told you, he said, after a long pause. Yes, I replied, quietly. You should have. I didn't want her to hurt you. But she did, I said, meeting his eyes. Because you didn't trust me with the truth. He stepped toward me. Then let me earn that trust now, he whispered. I didn't answer right away. Because part of me wanted to run. But another part, the one he saved, the one that wanted to believe, stayed still. Maybe love didn't arrive like thunder. Maybe it showed up in the quiet, after the past tried to tear everything down. We didn't speak for hours after Liana left. Dominic stayed in the study. I stayed by the window. We existed in two separate silences. His was guilt, mine was confusion. But by nightfall, I couldn't sit in the dark anymore. So I knocked. Once. Twice. The door opened. He didn't look surprised. I owe you an answer, he said, quietly, stepping aside. I entered. The study looked the same, sleek, clean, lifeless. But in the corner, near the shelves, there was a single photo on the desk. A woman. Older. Gentle eyes. Smiling. Your mother? I asked, softly. He nodded. And then he Saturday. And for the first time since I met him, he didn't speak like a stranger. She died in a fire, he said, voice low, almost hollow. Our house burned down the week after my 18th birthday. I sat across from him, saying nothing. I was supposed to be home, he continued, eyes fixed on the photo. I'd promised her. But I snuck out. Went to a party with Liana and some friends. I turned off my phone. He exhaled slowly. She called me 6 times. I didn't pick up. By the time I came home, it was already over. I closed my eyes for a moment. I'm sorry, I whispered. I spent years rebuilding the company, he said, jaw tight. Years pouring everything into work, into control, into being untouchable. Because if I was, I could pretend it didn't hurt. And Liana? I asked. She loved who I was before, he said. Before the guilt. Before the silence. But she didn't love the man I became. He looked at me then, eyes sharp and haunted. She wanted me to be whole again. But I wasn't. Not with her. I leaned forward. And what about me? I asked, quietly. What am I to you? He blinked, like the question caught him off guard. You were never supposed to be in this, he said, finally. But then I saw you at your sister's funeral. Standing alone. Crying, but not breaking. I saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Who? I whispered. Someone still fighting, he murmured. Even with the world falling apart. He stood, restless now. When Myra offered your name to cover the debt, I was furious. I thought she was cruel. I nodded slowly. So why didn't you say no? He looked back at me. Because I was afraid if I didn't, someone worse would say yes. Silence stretched between us. Then I stood. And walked toward him. I reached up and touched the side of his face, just once. I don't need a perfect man, I said, my voice soft. I need an honest one. He closed his eyes, leaning slightly into my touch. I'm trying, he said, barely audible. I know, I whispered. And for the first time since we met, we stood together not as debt and debtor, but as two broken people. Trying, learning, choosing. The next few days were quiet. But not in the way silence used to feel. Not like dread. Not like fear. It was steady, healing. I began waking up before Dominic. Started cooking again. Watering the plants in the greenhouse. Walking through the gardens without looking over my shoulder. He didn't try to control me. He just watched like he was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. I found myself in his office one afternoon, by accident, or maybe on purpose. A stack of contracts sat on his desk. Legal words. Business terms. Dozens of signatures, mine included. I stared at one line. Elena Sterling, spouse and beneficiary. I hadn't even known what I'd signed. He walked in and paused when he saw me. You want to know what it all means? He asked. I looked up at him. I want to understand the life I'm living, I said, evenly. He nodded. And for the next hour, he explained everything. The companies. The partnerships. The merger Myra had been planning before she died and how it was now mine. You're not just my wife on paper, he said, as I scanned the files. You own half of everything I've built. My breath caught. I didn't ask for that, I whispered. No, he replied, softly. But maybe you were the only one who wouldn't abuse it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time, I was curious. Curious about what I could become. Not Myra. Not Dominic's shadow. But me. The next morning, I asked to attend his board meeting. He blinked in surprise. Are you sure? He asked. I want to sit in, I said, firmly. Even if I say nothing. I want to know the empire I'm tied to. He nodded slowly. Then you'll sit next to me. The boardroom was everything I expected. Glossy. Cold. Sharp men in sharper suits. When I walked in with Dominic, their heads turned. But he pulled out a chair for me, and said simply. This is Elena Sterling. My wife. She's here because she belongs here. They didn't argue. But I saw the looks. The whispers. The disbelief. And I didn't flinch. Afterward, one of the older board members, Mr. Vale, cornered me in the hallway. You're not your sister, he said, bluntly. Myra was tough. Dangerous, even. I know, I replied, calm. He leaned in. And you? What are you? I smiled, small, sure. Still here, I said, meeting his stare. That's a start. But later that night, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. A phone call. Dominic, in the study. His voice low. Cold. No. I don't care what Vale thinks. If he tries anything, pull his funding. No, don't involve Elena. Yes, I said no. He hung up with a heavy sigh. When I walked in, he looked startled. You heard that, he said, not a question. Yes, I replied. He ran a hand through his hair. Vale has a habit of testing limits. I crossed my arms. What kind of limits? He hesitated. Financial threats. Backroom deals. Myra played his game. I won't let him drag you into it. I stepped closer. But what if I want to be involved? He looked at me carefully. Elena, this world is dark. Cutthroat. If you step in too far, they'll come for you. I took a breath. Then teach me to fight, I said. He stared at me for a long moment. And then, he smiled. The next week moved fast. Meetings. Contracts. Names I couldn't pronounce, and numbers I didn't fully grasp. But I listened. I took notes. I watched people the way Dominic did, silently, but not passively. I was learning. And it showed. Dominic stopped correcting me. He started asking me what I thought. And slowly, something shifted. The boardroom no longer felt foreign. It felt like mine. But power never comes without a test. And mine came in the form of an invitation. A charity gala hosted by Vale's daughter, Lucienne Vale. A name I'd seen on proposals. A woman with no real job title but endless info. When I told Dominic, his jaw tightened. She's worse than her father, he said. Then I should go, I replied. He shook his head. She'll eat you alive. I held his gaze. Not if I bite first. The gala was held at a museum downtown. Gold, glass, violins. The kind of place Myra used to command. I walked in wearing one of her dresses, sleek black, sharp neckline, long slit. It wasn't me. But tonight, it had to be. Lucienne spotted me from across the room. She was elegance wrapped in venom. Darling, she purred, holding out her hand. I was hoping you'd come. I took it. I hear you're rebuilding what your sister left behind, she said, sipping from a flute of champagne. I'm not rebuilding, I said, calmly. I'm reinventing. Her smile faltered just slightly. Touché. We talked. She probed. Asked about Dominic. About our marriage. About why Myra would leave me everything. I answered only what I needed to. She was used to playing with sharks. But I'd learned from someone colder than any of them, Dominic. And I knew silence could be a weapon. Later, I found myself standing alone by the sculpture room. Mr. Vale approached. No smile. No subtlety. You surprised me tonight, he said, staring ahead. You're not like her. No, I agreed, coolly. I'm not. She would have burned this place down for fun. I'd only do it if I had to. He turned toward me slowly. You're smarter than I thought. Thank you, I replied. But I don't need your approval. He smiled thinly. No, he murmured, but you will need allies. Then he walked away. In the car, Dominic glanced over. Well, she hates me, I said, thinking of Lucienne. He fears me. He smirked. Good, he whispered. We didn't speak the rest of the drive. But I felt his hand rest over mine. Not to control. Not to guide. Just to say we're in this together. And for once, I didn't feel like the girl trying to survive. I felt like a woman who had finally stepped into her own norm. One of Myra's old storage trunks, tucked away in the back of the mansion's east wing. Dominic said he'd kept most of her things locked there out of sight, out of mind. I don't know why I went looking. Maybe I just wanted to feel close to her again. Maybe a part of me still needed answers. Maybe. I already knew something wasn't right. The trunk was old. Heavy. I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened it. Clothes. Notebooks. Photos of a life that felt both foreign and familiar. Then, at the bottom, I found a folder. Red leather. Thick. Labeled in Myra's sharp handwriting. 4 eyes that matter. I froze. Inside were documents, emails, wire transfers, handwritten notes in Myra's distinct shorthand. Most of it made no sense. But then, I saw a name I recognized. Lucienne Vale. The notes read like a journal, only this wasn't personal. It was tactical. Lucienne offered to cover the debt. Too generous. She wants a stake in the Sterling merger. Can't trust her. Dominic suspects nothing. Good. Safer that way. If I disappear, look at the Greenpoint Shell Corporation. It's all there. My throat tightened. Disappear. Myra hadn't thought she'd die. She thought someone would make her disappear. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling with the folder clutched to my chest. Dominic found me just before dawn. He stood in the doorway, watching. You found something, he said, not a question. I nodded slowly. She was scared, I whispered. And she kept it all from you. He stepped closer. What did she write? I held out the folder. He took it. Flipped through. Page by page. By the end, his face was pale. This is bad. Who's behind Greenpoint? I asked. He closed his eyes. It's not a real company. It's a front. One of Vale's old playthings. And Lucienne? She plays cleaner than her father, but she's got more blood on her hands than he ever did. I swallowed hard. So what do we do? He looked at me, tired, but steady. quietly. If Myra was right, someone killed her. And they think they got away with it. For the first time since the wedding, I felt real fear. Not for myself. Not even for Dominic. But for the truth. Because whatever Myra had uncovered, it was big enough to kill 4. Greenpoint wasn't just a shell corporation. It was a black hole. I dug through Myra's notes by day, and by night, Dominic and I scoured old merger files and archived financials, anything that might link Greenpoint to the Vales. Nothing was clear. But something felt wrong. Hidden in plain sight. It was almost midnight when I found it. A series of quietly approved asset transfers, small enough to avoid notice, but frequent enough to mean something. All routed through a company called Barrow and Finch Investments. I tilted the screen toward Dominic. Ever heard of them? I asked. He stared. Then stood up slowly. No. But I know who has. The next morning, we visited a man named Gerald Quinn, Dominic's old CFO. Retired. Quiet. Loyal. Gerald poured tea like it was a sacred ritual. I warned Myra once, he said, his voice gravel and regret. Told her not to dig into Barrow and Finch. But she wouldn't stop. Why? I asked, quietly. He looked at me with tired eyes. Because she finally realized the debt wasn't real. The room went silent. Dominic's jaw clenched. What do you mean it wasn't real? He said. Gerald set his cup down. Someone created the illusion of debt. Fabricated losses. Staged payouts. Myra owed nothing. It was all a move to force her into surrendering her shares in Sterling. But who? I whispered. He looked at me, then at Dominic. I don't know. But whoever did it had access to everything. Including your signature, Dominic. My heart thudded. Dominic stood frozen. His face stone. She said I signed the merger agreement alone, he muttered, eyes distant. She insisted on handling it. Someone forged it, Gerald said, gently. Or she did it under duress. Are you saying Myra signed away everything, to protect someone? Gerald hesitated. Then, finally, he said, yes. The ride home was silent. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that sits heavy between two people with too many questions, and too few answers. At the mansion, I stopped just inside the front door. Dominic, I said, barely above a whisper, if someone faked the debt, then Myra didn't owe you anything. He turned to me, his voice quiet. I know. Then why did you marry me? He stepped closer. To protect what was left. Even if it meant using you. That hurt more than it should have. But maybe it was the truth. And the truth, I was learning, didn't care if it broke your heart. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake, with Myra's file under my pillow. And I realized something chilling. If someone went through this much trouble to cover up a fake debt, they wouldn't stop until the last person chasing it was silenced. The next clue wasn't buried in documents. It was hidden in a voice memo. One of Myra's old phones, dead, dusty, and sealed in a Ziploc bag labeled Return to Drawer, Keep Charger. I plugged it in with shaking hands. One file. Dated 2 weeks before she died. Recording, private meeting, do not share. I sat on the bedroom floor, knees pulled to my chest, and pressed play. The voice was hers. I know what you did, Myra said, her tone cold but scared. You promised you'd help me. That no one would touch me if I gave them the merger. And now they want more. They want him. And they want her. A second voice followed. A man's voice. You're overreacting. This was never about you, Myra. You were just the middle. My heart stopped. I recognized it. Slow. Confident. Almost kind. Sebastian. Dominic's childhood friend. Best man at our wedding. Our trusted family lawyer. I played it again. Then again. He knew. He helped them. He let Myra walk into that fire. That evening, Dominic came to the room, uninvited. He hadn't knocked since the night he first apologized. You look pale, he said, softly. I held the phone out. Listen, I whispered. He did. And as the recording played, something in him cracked. He sat down slowly. Face hollow. He knew, Dominic murmured. Yes, I said. He let it happen. Yes. He looked at me with wet eyes. I loved him like a brother. I didn't respond. Because betrayal always comes from someone you never expected. We confronted Sebastian the next morning. He was dressed in his usual charcoal grey, tie perfect, hair too neat. The picture of polished control. Come in, he said, smiling like he didn't poison our lives. Dominic didn't wait. He slammed the phone on Sebastian's desk. Explain, he growled. Sebastian's smile fell. He pressed play. And he listened. Then, calmly, he leaned back. You weren't supposed to find that. Silence. Cold. Deafening. You used her, I said, my voice shaking. You let her die. Sebastian shrugged. She was naive. Thought she could outsmart Vale. I warned her. You knew the debt was fake, Dominic said, voice like thunder. Sebastian nodded. Of course. It was my idea. Dominic lunged. I grabbed his arm. Don't, I said, tears burning down my cheeks. Not like this. Sebastian stood up, adjusted his cuffs. Leave this alone, Dominic. You're rich. Powerful. You've got your little wife now. He looked at me, eyes gleaming. You don't want to end up like your sister, Elena. We left in silence. But inside me, something had changed. Fear didn't feel like chains anymore. It felt like fuel. Back at the mansion, Dominic stood by the window, fists clenched. I'm going to destroy him, he said, his voice calm and full of storm. I stepped beside him. No, I said, quietly. We are. He looked at me. And I knew this wasn't his war anymore. It was ours. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that screams. Dominic hadn't said a word since our visit to Sebastian's office. He was brooding, calculated, distant, dangerous. And I was unraveling on fire, heart split between rage and grief. That night, I found him in the study. The fireplace was lit. Whiskey in his hand. His tie undone. Papers spread across the desk, legal contracts, financial trails, blackmail material, threat assessments. You're building a case, I said. I'm preparing a war, he replied, not looking up. I stepped closer. We should go public. Let the world see what Sebastian did. He shook his head. No. Too many ties. If we move loud, the veils will bury us. We take him down from the inside. I walked around the desk and met his eyes. That's what Myra tried to do. Quiet resistance. It got her killed. She was alone, he said, firmly. We're not. I took a breath. And if it takes too long? If more people get hurt? If I get hurt? His jaw tightened. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that, I whispered. He stood and stepped forward. I can control this. I laughed, bitterly. Control? That's your problem, Dominic. You think control is protection. He stepped back like I'd slapped him. Everything I've done was to shield you from what I know. And what if I don't want to be shielded? I snapped. What if I want to fight? Silence. His expression cracked, just for a second. You're not like her, he said, softly. You don't have to end like her. But I do, I whispered, voice trembling. If I don't finish what she started. We didn't sleep in the same bed that night. Not because we didn't want to, but because we both needed space to hold our pain without swallowing each other whole.